Now, I say that you get to choose your supervisor because if you have a job after you graduate and they will inevitably give you a supervisor that the agency requires that you speak with, just exactly like the site supervisor you have now. So that person is more than likely outside of your control. But as a graduate, you do not have to use that site supervisor as your licensure supervisor. You can choose somebody else. You can hire your own. Now, I do mean hire, so that means that's someone you're going to have to pay. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. So as you look at your current, your Capella site supervisor and Capella faculty supervisor, an idea of the kinds of things that you like and you don't like, then when you go shopping for your licensure supervisor, you can have a list of things you're looking for. You can have items that you can discuss with them about what you'd like in your supervision. Now, I'd like to think that any current site supervisor that you have in internship would also take that feedback. I'd like to think that. I would expect our faculty supervisors to take your feedback if you're looking for more or less of a particular kind of interaction for supervision. I would expect that if you said, hey, Dr. Schooley, could you talk less and let us talk more about that? I would welcome that feedback, and I would expect that any of our faculty supervisors would do that as well. And if you have hired someone that you actually pay after graduation, absolutely you would have a right to demand that they work with you the way you're looking to be worked with, within certain ethical and legal bounds, of course. I have heard stories, I've never met anyone, because I would turn them in if I had, that they went to a supervisor, said, please, I'll give you $4,000, please sign this, and never meet for supervision. I've heard that happens. No one I know has done that. And I would hope that the experience you have in your Capella internship, your experience of supervision, would be such that you would be hungry and seek out future supervision rather than find a way to try to work around it. Quite frankly, I still reach out to people like Dr. Townsend and Dr. Bayman when I am stuck with cases. So even after this many years, I still seek consult and supervision for the work that I do. It should never stop. It should never end. So just to clarify now, so those are the stages. You have the site supervisor, you have your faculty supervisor, that's school, and then after school is probably your work supervisor, who may or may not be the same person that you use for licensure supervision. Once you're licensed, then you can continue to seek consult, and I hope you do. But then it's that point when you can be thinking about you becoming a supervisor. And what you need to do to be a supervisor is very specific by state statute. Now, I know that wherever you are in the program, you have already had to look up your state statutes on what you're supposed to do to get licensed. I know you've done that. Practically every damn class asks for that information. What you probably have not looked for is what are the credentials of a supervisor for your state. And this can range widely from state to state. There are some states where the minute you're licensed, the very next day you can be a supervisor. That little. There are other states where you have to hold your license for a certain number of years, and then you have to take additional education, usually in the form of some kind of continuing education workshop, or some states require all the way out to the gold standard, which is AAMFT approved supervisor status. And I'll talk about what all of that entails, but that entails a minimum of 18 months. So this is after you qualify, and then another 18 months to train to be a supervisor before then you can do licensure supervision. So as you can see, depending on your state, those qualifications are all over the place as to what is required of the supervisor to be considered a legit state supervisor. In at least one state, Nevada, you're required a minimum of 2 supervisors. A minimum. Now, I think that's the only state I know of that requires 2, but then I haven't looked at the statutes on all 50 states. Does anybody know that in their state that other than Nevada, that you're required 2? Anybody? I can only see one page of thumbnails, so if you're raising your hand, I can't see it. Come off mute and sing out, Louise. No. So I only know of Nevada, and I think you've got a primary supervisor and a task supervisor.
It's called
and
a
the
secondary
credential.
supervisor.
It's secondary, okay. And the requirements for those 2 credentialing is different. The secondary one meets a lower standard. It's sort of like a supervisor in training. They have to do that for a while before they can become a primary supervisor. All right. So again, all supervisor for licensure, post-grad licensure, typically requires that person be licensed. I know of no state where the supervisor for licensure doesn't themselves have to be licensed. That does not mean that you won't work at an agency someday where your supervisor is not licensed. That could happen, but that's at the agency level. When you're looking at the state licensure level, then you have to meet the state standards for licensure. So but what kind of license? Well, so are you asking Dr. Bayman what kind of license our individuals might be going for? Well, so now my prejudice is showing.
No. What kind of, some states, like even my state, I can supervise an LPCC, but an MFTC can only be supervised by an LMFT. So like what license?
What credentials? Exactly. Yes. So there are some states that require, some states require 100 hours of post-grad supervision. Some require up to 200 hours. At least North Carolina allows you to use your hours in graduate school to be used for licensure. I don't know of any other states. I think there might be some other states, but I don't know. I couldn't name them, right? So not only do you have to know how many hours of supervision you need to have, but to Dr. Bayman's point, of those hours, who can do it? Some states, it's only a credentialed supervisor for marriage and family therapy. That's it. Some states, half of it has to be that person, and the other half can be social worker, mental health counselor, or the variations on mental health counselor, LPC, blah, blah, blah. The mental health counselors have all these different names. We have got a few different names in MFT, but not nearly as many. Sort of like Florida license plates. We've got about 50 different kinds of license plates, but so the mental health counselors are like that. All these different names. So it just depends, again, what your state says. So the next time you have an assignment that says, go look at your state statutes, don't stop at the education and the fact that you have to take the exam. Everybody's got to do that. And the fact that you have a certain number of supervision hours and a certain number of clinical hours. You want to find out, by the way, how many of those clinical hours have to be relational. Some states don't require any, which just kills me. Other states require up to 50%. Some only require like a third. So you want to look that up too. But that, and why is that? Why am I even mentioning that in a workshop on supervision? Because if your licensure supervisor, even your site supervisor where you're doing your internship, if they don't know this off the top of their head, I would question them as a good supervisor. Good supervisors should know their statutes like the back of their hand. They should be able to cite that to you without hesitation. How many hours you need, how much of that needs to be relational, what sites can you practice in? In some states, between graduation and licensure, there are only certain kinds of places where you can work. Or if you work in, say, private practice, there are additional rules about what you can do. Some states, you have to pass the exam first, and then you begin counting your hours. And in many of those states, you can actually bill insurance. In other states, you cannot bill insurance until you are licensed, period. So if your supervisor for licensure does not know this information, I'd start shopping again, quite frankly, because they might let you get away with stuff that would, God forbid, prevent you from getting licensed after you spent all this time and money going to them for supervision. Do not let this happen to you. I have had people come to me and had to start their supervision all over because of some sort of a glitch with a previous supervisor. So no one will guard your licensure process better than you will. So you need to know your law. If you take nothing else from the next hour, it's know what your state law requires. And for those of you who are ambitious and want to license in a couple of states simultaneously, then you have to know multiple states' requirements so that if you are going to do that, be licensed in two different states, that you meet those requirements, that you know how many hours each state requires, what the credentials are of the supervisor. You have to know all of that cold so that when you go shopping for a supervisor, you get optimally one person that can do both states. Optimally. Now, I personally am licensed in 5 states, and because I'm an AAMFT approved supervisor, I can supervise in additional states without being licensed in those states. I have to be licensed. The statute will say they must be licensed, but my AMFT approved supervisor status then allows me to supervise for licensure. So that's something else to look at when you're shopping for a supervisor around those credentials. Some states like Georgia, they have to be AMFT approved, period. That's a requirement. Other states, they can be state approved by meeting education or whatever the qualifications are, or they can be AMFT approved. Some states require licensure in that state and then meeting the supervisor requirements. So these are all, I know this is a lot of detail. I understand that, but I'm trying to give you an idea of the breadth of things that you need to look at to be sure that the supervisor you're working with is actually qualified to do the work. Now, some states like Florida is sort of a nanny state. What that means is that when you put in your application, you have to name the person who will be your licensure supervisor, and the state will check to make sure they are qualified. If they are not, they will reject your application, and you have to get somebody else. But I notice the vast majority of states do not ask for that. Dr. Bateman, do they ask for that in Colorado? Do you?
Nope.
Nope.
At the very
Nope.
end, the supervisor fills out, signs the forms, the attestation forms, sends it into the state. And at that time, at 2 years post-grad, or however long it took to get 1,500 clinical hours, they go, oh, no, that supervisor's not qualified. you got to start all over again, which happened to
Not okay. Yeah, definitely not okay. Yeah. So in some ways, Florida is helpful because hopefully someone won't, they won't get into that particular pickle. But so again, no one will protect your licensure process better than you will. And I want to believe that every person who presents themselves as a supervisor has every positive intention of being correct. But the fact is that those of us who have been licensed for a very, really, very long time often do not stay up to date on the laws. Again, Florida, now there are many things wrong with the state of Florida, but there's a couple of things we get right here. And one of them is that supervisors are required to take a 4-hour renewal course every 6 years to be up to date on the laws and rules just related to supervision. They're also required, same 6 years, to take, is it 3 hours? 3 or 4 hours? I'll have to look it up. It's either 3 or 4 hours of just renewal of the statutes in general around their license. So supervisors have to take 2 of those to be up to date on the license. But this is very new. It's only been in the last maybe 8 years that this requirement has been on the books. And so I know that there are some of you, in fact, most of you are in states where there is no requirement for you to learn the laws and rules. There's no workshop, there's no exam, nothing. So you could be practicing and doing all kinds of things that are against the law that you don't know because you haven't read your statutes. Again, in Florida, and believe me, all the Floridians groan and gnash their teeth and weep and carry on that they have to take an 8-hour workshop, by the end of which you would just want to poke your eyes out. But 8 hours of learning about the laws and rules of Florida. And I teach that course. We do it in the form of a Jeopardy game to keep it exciting and interesting. But I always promise them at the beginning that sometime during the day, they are going to learn that their agency or their practice where they are is breaking some law. I guarantee it, because people don't stay up to date on the law. They just don't. So again, you need to learn what those things are. All right, there's a whole lot of stuff in the chat coming through.
That's
Some
me,
of it is
Dr.
just
Schooley.
sharing of resources. Is there anything that's a question
No,
for
this is just
me?
me.
No, okay, all right. One that did catch my eye is, can you use a Capella faculty member to be your postgraduate supervisor? And the answer is, if they say yes, sure. The only thing you can't do is have them be your faculty supervisor and site supervisor at the same time. That's a conflict. But we do have faculty who are site supervisors at someone's site, but then they are automatically not a site faculty supervisor for that intern. So we want to make sure there's no conflict of interest. But yeah, postgraduate, all the faculty are just everyday citizens that can take on interns. And I know some people who are in this room right now, who, if they didn't know them in the master's program, often won't take them as a postgrad because they want to make sure that they're very clear about their ethics. So let's talk about some of those things. So what does it mean for a person to be your licensure supervisor? For that matter, to be your faculty or your site supervisor. So there's obvious stuff like our job as supervisors is to help you grow as a clinician, for you to get better at the models, for you to know the models well enough to pass the licensing exam. We expect all of that stuff, right? That nobody is going to be surprised at that. Maybe less obvious, but it should be pretty obvious, because then you have a whole class in ethics, that we are also required to be watching out for your ethical behavior. That if you should be calling in an abuse call to the registry that you do that, that you don't call the police if there's domestic violence, because you don't do that, that you are maintaining your client's confidentiality, even if they are a teenager, because the law says that if they are in session with you, they have a right to that confidentiality, and you can't squeal to anybody else, including their parents, which can make for uncomfortable situations sometimes, which is why Schooley has the rule of never see a kid without the guardian there, but that can be hotly debated some other day. But
It can be debated at the next Spill the Tea, Dr.
well, there you
Schooley,
go.
where we will have a panel of our advisors talking about these hot topic questions. So
there you
come
go.
back.
This is is that the Ask Me Anything
It is.
workshop? All right. So we could talk about some of those things, our beliefs about, so there are some things that are enshrined in the ethical codes, but even those, if you took a class with Dr. Bayman, are open to interpretation. And you have to go through a process to kind of figure out where you're going to land in your decision making. So we as supervisors, we are required to help you go through that decision making process. And each of us is going to have some pretty clear beliefs that may not be the same across us. And that would be interesting. That would be interesting to see where we would disagree on ethical issues. I can certainly remember a colleague who once called me, not a Capella person, who contacted me about, she saw this couple and then they divorced, and one of them wanted to continue, and the clinician said, no, I'm not going to do that because I saw you couple, so I'm not going to see either of you individually. That was her rule. And I said, well, I don't know that I would have that rule. I probably would see them individually. But then she said 2 years later, one of them came back and she said yes. And I said, now, wait a minute. What's magical about 2 years? And would you accept the other one 2 years later as well? So we had an entire discussion about how you go through that decision-making process and what are the benefits thereof and what are the dangers thereof. Because it could be that if you're seeing both members of a divorced couple and this one finds out that you learned something about this one that you didn't tell them, they might be unhappy with you. So part of our job as supervisors is to help you navigate these kinds of sticky situations. Happily, not all cases are sticky, but as supervisors, we have to keep our ears and eyes open to catch when you might not realize that you've walked into a sticky situation. In my personal experience, I have a lot of interns who will come to me and say, oh, this is a really complicated case. And then I'm like, yeah, I've seen about 50 of those. So maybe not so complicated, but what's complicated for one may not be complicated for another. So be aware that there are those developmental differences. And so that's why you always have to trust us. Well, trust but verify, to quote Reagan, right? Trust but verify. Go look at the codes yourself. Go look at the statutes yourself.
Well, what I was saying is I've had supervisees who I've talked to who have not been able to trust their supervisors to say things like, I'm attracted to a client, or I did hear about child neglect, but I don't want to make the report, or this, and this. So they have to be able to trust us and say, I screwed up, or I'm not sure what to do. A lot of times supervisees don't want to say, I don't know what to do. They don't trust us enough to be able to say that.
And I would like to think that all of our faculty would welcome you saying, I really have something I want to talk about, but I'm afraid you're going to yell at me, or I'm afraid you're going to make fun of me, or I'm afraid. First of all, it would break my heart because that means I had failed. I would have failed you if you were afraid to come to me with something, and that would be absolutely on me, because I'm definitely not in the business to make fun of or to belittle anyone's concern just because it's not something I would find difficult. I probably did find it difficult when I was in your position as a student or as a postgrad. So, but this is a really great point is if you cannot at any supervisor you have across your lifespan, if you can't say to them, I got a conundrum and my big fear is if I tell it to you that you're going to have this kind of a negative reaction. I would hope that any supervisor that you choose, even one that's assigned to you, would be willing to manage that. And if they can't, it's time to find a different site, a different supervisor, a different job. It's time to get the hell out of there, quite honestly. And I know that that might not be easy because you probably went through 50 options to get your current site, and the idea of getting a second one wants to make you vomit in your waste paper basket. I get that. That's why you need to always have at least one backup in your back pocket. If you don't have a secondary site right now, I'd say start looking for one. You may never do it, but I would always have it. I mean, there was sorry, Dr. Bayman?
No, I was thinking Jeremy brought up a really good point in the chat that when your employment supervisor and your clinical supervisor are the same thing, that's really a dual relationship, because the employment supervisor might want to fire you, but the clinical supervisor might say, great, I'm glad you have this dilemma. Let's work this through. And they're two different hats there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. My experience with postgraduate, now these are not in school, postgraduate interns, is that the supervisor they're assigned at their job is usually not worth the powder to blow them up. So I would always suggest that you hire a supervisor for postgraduate licensure processes, because then you actually have a contract with them and you're a customer, so you can demand of them certain things. Now, not free supervision and not to sign off on paperwork that you haven't done, obviously, but certainly, do they have certain expertise? Are they willing to supervise you using a model that maybe they either don't know very well or don't even like? I mean, there are models I do not like, but if you wanted to work in them, I would work with you to be the very best at that you could possibly be, because that's my commitment to you. But not every supervisor does everything. No supervisor does everything. I don't do a lot of self of the therapist stuff. I know Dr. Bayman is going to, smack me, but I don't do that shtick. But that's okay, because she does. And there are other people who do. And if that's what you're looking for, go to them. As far as I know, there is no state that won't let you have up at least 2 supervisors. I don't know of any state that forbids that. And quite frankly, you can have as many supervisors as you have money for. They don't all have to be the ones that are their hours count for your license. If you want to specialize in some particular model and you go to a supervision group for that, and even you pay for it, that does not have to be the hours that you count for licensure. You're just doing that for your own education. By the way, let's talk about money for a second, because you're not doing this master's degree so that you can give it all away. You're doing this to get a job someday and hopefully make at least $100,000 a year, right? Everybody signed up for that? Okay. So remember that all money you spend on any sort of development, workshops, extra supervision, your licensure supervision, any trainings you go to, all of that is deductible as a professional expense. This is particularly important if you're in private practice, or if you're an independent contractor, or if you have even a small practice on the side. Let's say you have an agency job, but then you also do a small private practice. You can use all of that training to offset your income and lower your tax burden. You just have to have a good tax person that knows how to do that. So that's somebody else you want to hire in your life post-grad is someone who knows how to do those kinds of taxes. I don't know if H&R Block, is going to have that kind of expertise. But what I'm saying is all the supervision you pay for is a professional expense. Your AMFT membership, your state membership, every workshop you go to, all is a professional expense. So then don't be afraid to go get additional supervision or training because of the cost. Now, I will say, what I usually say is, I would recommend that you wait until you're licensed before you do all that, unless somebody else is going to pay for it. I mean, if you work someplace and they're going to send you to EFT training, or they're going to send you to EMDR training and they're going to pay for it, take it, do it. If you got to pay for it, I typically say wait till you're licensed, because then that becomes your continuing education you need for your license renewal, all of which can be off your taxes, right? Now, I don't know of any state that allows you to use supervision post-license as continuing education. I don't believe it. I don't know of any state that does that. That typically has to be a workshop with learning objectives and all that kind of stuff. Okay. All right. So we've talked about what you should be learning now from your internship site and your faculty supervisor on what you like. We've talked about hiring your licensure supervisor post-grad, between graduation and getting licensed, that person or persons, and getting what you need from them. And then now you're licensed and you're looking to be a supervisor yourself. So let's take Florida as a case. So you graduate, it takes a minimum of 2 years to get licensed, up to 5 years. And many states have that, by the way, between 2 and 5 years. That's very common. And then once you're licensed, you have to hold that license for a minimum of 3 years. During that 3-year period, you can take the additional education. To be a Florida state qualified supervisor, if you've clocked the 3 years after your license and you take the 12-hour workshop, that's it, 12 hours, you can then supervise someone else to be licensed. So they're leaning on the fact that you have hopefully good supervision while you were getting licensed, and you have 3 years of experience that you have to share to future people. That's what Florida requires. Now, if you want the gold standard, then you're going to go for AAMFT approved supervision. And again, once you are licensed, you can begin the process of becoming an AAMFT approved supervisor. But it has a lot of stuff you got to do. First of all, instead of a 12-hour class or nothing, which is what a lot of states have, nothing, in Colorado, do you have to take any education, Dr. Bayman?
Or just simple state supervision?
Yeah, for state, nope, no education.
No idea. No, I have no idea, because I'm.
You didn't go in that way. That's right. Dr. Flynn.
But on our
Yes.
forms, on our forms, when people, it says you're an you have to check one. I am an LMFT. I think if you are an LMFT with 2 years experience, you can be someone's state supervisor.
Right, but no education. No,
that I know of.
That you know of. Okay, Dr. Flynn Kroska, in the state of Minnesota, what is required to be a state level? Minnesota.
Oh yeah, sure, Now, what was the question again? I'm sorry.
If you are not an AMFT approved supervisor, are there any education requirements to be a state qualified supervisor to license someone to be an MFT, an LMFT?
Yes, the AMFT training is enough to get you to be a state board approved supervisor, but you need to be licensed for 3 years, I think.
3 years? Okay.
Yeah,
if they didn't take the AMFT, is there some other amount of education that, or is it you got to take the 30 hours AMFT?
Well, some entities like some agencies and those types of things will have the training, so you don't have to take it with the AMFT. You can just take it from people.
Right. So there are other sources of that, but there is an educational component.
Yes, and if you wanted to
Okay.
do LPCC in the state as well, you'd have to do a 40-hour supervision, and then you could do both.
Okay, so there's additional education if you wanted to supervise the two different licenses. Okay,
Yeah.
great. All right. So back to AMFT. So during that, now AMFT requires that you have your license a minimum of 2 years. Florida said 3, and Minnesota said 3, but AMFT says 2. And during that time, you can be earning that credential. That's the 30 hours of education that can only be taken through AMFT, and it's very expensive, like $500 like expensive. It's very expensive to do. And it's very, very popular because it's sought by so many states. In fact, if you want to be a supervisor at the VA, you have to be an AMFT qualified supervisor. So very, very popular. I have had people that I was mentoring to be a supervisor that every quarter, they tried to get into the class and it would be full up and they'd have to wait another 3 months before they could get in the class. So you want to think ahead in terms of doing that. There are ways to get that, many different ways to get the class. There's an online version where you do all 30 hours online. There's a hybrid version where you do 15 online and 15 live interactive. You can take all 30 hours at one of the AMFT institutes. So you would take it all week. You could take it at an AMFT conference and do a in-person conference. You could do it that way. So many, many ways to get that education. So, but all of it's expensive. Just to be, save your pennies in anticipation of that. Now, for many states, that's enough. You take the education, you're good to go. Not for AMFT approved. For AMFT approved, you have to provide 180 hours of supervision while receiving 36 hours of mentoring from a senior AMFT approved supervisor. So that's basically an hour of mentoring for every 5 hours that you're providing supervision. But get this, if what you're doing, you're ready to do this, and you don't yet qualify to be a state supervisor for licensure, that means the only people you can supervise are students. So whoever is your current faculty advisor for your state, stay in touch with them, because when you're ready to do this, you're going to want to talk to them to say, do you got any students? I'd like to be a site supervisor so I can be supervising for my AMFT credential. That's how you would do it before you were a state qualified. I know I'm just spitting information at you at high speed. And if you ever want a go over of this, but if you just kind of get the general landscape of what we're talking about. Now, what I tell Florida people to do is this. I tell them, while you're in your 2 years post-license, so 2 years to get licensed, 2 years post-license, during that time, take your 12 hours so that by the time you hit 2 years, you're ready to take on Florida graduates to be supervised, and can charge them, by the way, and that charge can range up to, the highest I know is 125. Dr. Townsend, do you know of anybody that charges more than that an hour for post-grad supervision?
In Colorado, I charge 125. I'm the lowest. They charge 200 and up for it. How? I don't understand. Yeah, it's a lot.
Dr. Schooley,
Yeah,
you do have a couple questions
known-
coming in here.
Mhm.
Okay, good. Let's do, oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Townsend, you were going to tell us?
No, yes, I know some that charge 600 a month.
600 a month. Okay. And so since it's
For
usually
supervision.
4 hours, that's $150 an hour. Okay. I charge way less than that.
Stop.
I will not tell you what it is until you're graduated, and then you'll contact me. So I'm not going to tell you what it is.
This is
But
a
I
woman
charge
who
here.
does not have a
Same here.
mortgage, okay?
That's right. That's
Same
right. And
here.
my house is paid off and my student loans are forgiven. So yeah,
Yeah.
I can afford to not charge a whole lot of money.
Same
But-
here, Dr. Schooley. I charge less than the going as well.
Yeah,
And that I
yes.
get triadic. Yep. Exactly.
By far. Right. But that doesn't, and I often say to my people, so since I only charge X, does that make my supervision less valuable?
Okay, so here's my argument to that. I have post-grad supervisees that are making $160 an hour from their clients. Minimum,
Okay.
160 an hour.
I could
Why should I
renegotiate
be
their hourly
charging
rate.
them
Yeah.
$35, Dr. Schooley? when they're
Who
making-
said? I never said that number. I don't know where you got that number. So yeah,
I've never
I would
charged
agree.
that little either. So
Okay, yeah. So there you go. I also know what people make in Florida in agency work, and it's peanuts. It's peanuts.
And I agree that there'd
Same
be
as
reasons
Minnesota.
to slide. There'd be reasons to slide on supervision.
Slide,
Not
right?
that I want
Exactly.
to cut off this discourse, but I do want to make sure we get
Oh,
to
it's
the
10 minutes
question.
till.
Yes.
Okay, you're right.
So-
So anyway, so there's site supervision, student supervision, licensure supervision, mentoring to become a supervisor, and then for the rest of your life getting consult. That's and you're either going to be a supervisor or you're going to be seeking a supervisor throughout your entire career. All right, there's over 100 of them. So if you've gleaned what they are, Darby, tell me what they are.
First question that I found is, because you've answered some of them as you went, but the
Good.
one Katrina Harvey's asking, do you take postgraduate supervisees from Capella?
Only from the states that I'm licensed in.
Okay, what states are you licensed in case they wanted
Ohio,
to contract?
Michigan, Virginia, North Carolina, and Florida.
Okay. And then some people were asking about the averages of, we kind of talked about it a little bit here, but what should someone expect for the going rate for paid supervision? I know that clearly, right, there can be a big divide. We did talk a little bit about just where you're located can depend. You can check on local groups. It depends on monthly, individual,
And
how
what
did it get
what you're going for. If you want a supervisor who has a very, very specialized experience that you want to learn, then I would expect to pay more for it.
And someone asked, what if they are looking for someone who's in a really niche, modality or experience? What recommendation would you have for them to find that person?
Go to workshops about that and make note of who the presenters are and make note of who is in attendance.
Great. As far as questions that I'm seeing here, the only other one was Rachel asked, does it complicate things when applying for full licensure if you've had two supervisors? Which you kind of touched on a little, but just in case.
It should not. If your state allows you to have two official supervisors, then both of them would fill out the paperwork indicating the time period that they supervised you and the number of hours that they provided of that supervision and the number of clinical hours that supervision covers.
Okay.
Can I
go
ask,
for it.
clarify? So I was referencing more like if you had a poor experience and you were like, I need to leave, I need to find another supervisor. Would you then recommend filling out that form right then and there?
Absolutely.
I'm leaving,
Yeah, absolutely.
here's the hours.
Yeah. I would ask that supervisor to complete whatever verification forms that the state requires and that you put that in mothballs and scan it into your computer and all that kind of good stuff.
I'd love to piggyback on that though, Dr. Schooley. I had a supervisee who had 6 months in with a supervisor, post-grad, a lot of hours, and that supervisor died. She had no records. So I would say, even if you have a good supervisor, from time to time, every few months, have them fill out or verify your hours.
Absolutely. You can do that in the form of a spreadsheet that they physically sign, or What I have been known to do is each at the end of the year to send a letter that you've had this many hours of supervision. When people pay me via the various platforms, I tell them to say, supervision X number of hours, and then I either say confirmed or whatever, so they have documentation of each time that I have confirmed, yes, that's how many hours of supervision that they have completed. And I do this because that actually came before the Florida Licensure Board. 3 people all were in supervision with the same supervisor who died. One had receipts for every check that she spent, and her supervision was approved. The other one had signed documents that the third one had nothing and said, but I went with them. That person had to redo all of their supervision. So have documentation of your supervision, and I agree, along the way at some quarterly basis or something like that. Also check to see, can all of your supervision be done virtual, or does some percentage of it have to be in person breathing the same air? Some states will say in person, but then will say in person includes electronic means. So, but and some will accept phone, some will not. So again, check your statutes about what you're allowed. Anyone want to come off mute? What happens if you have enough supervision to graduate, but not enough for your state? So that's something you want to know right away. Right away. Most states accept Capella because we're a co-AMFTIA program, so they usually accept whatever we say. They accept that for licensure. But if you know in the state statutes that you have to have more clinical hours or more supervision hours, obviously plan to do that while you are in school. Then you will go to the site-based learning labs 2 every single term. Even if you don't need it for Capella, you'll be doing it extra if you need that. But I don't know of any states that require more than the 100 hours we require.
There are many states, and there is a whole document I'm trying to find now.
Supervision, clinical, yes. Didn't know supervision.
Some require additional, like 20 to 50, depending on the state. I know it's a lot of East Coast, like smaller states, but Capella actually does have a whole document outlining every state that has these exceptions.
Well, there you go.
I'm going to try to put them in the chat for you guys.
There you go. So if you are in internship and you are in one of those states that requires more than 100, couple of things. One, go find yourself an AMFT approved supervisor for your site. Do that. Go talk to your faculty supervisor about coming double sessions. Go to the site-based learning labs as often as you're allowed, which is 2 per term. Go to all the spill the teas and get that. So strategize how you would do that.
I did put in the chat, guys. So these are the MFT MS course comparisons that Capella has put out this year, stating if you are in one of these states, you are going to have extra requirements that is not covered by Capella. Please look at it. Take some time, because you don't want to graduate and be done and you still have hours to get.
Well, there you go. And again, knowledge of your state statutes is the best insurance policy that you can buy.
And not to do a plug, but I know Dr. Schooley will let me anyways, because she lets me plug. If you enjoyed learning from Dr. Schooley today, which I don't know if you did, I had a blast and I'm the one hosting. Her, Dr. Bayman, Dr. Townsend, they are 3 advisors. So if you enjoyed the knowledge you got today, we are actually open for a VP of Events board membership. So if you enjoy Spill the Teas, I would love to teach you how to be the person that goes up and does that. If you're interested in leadership in the MFT world, you actually get mentorship from these amazing ladies. So please, if you're interested, I put a flyer in the chat. Thank Dr. Schooley. All of them donate their time to do this, right? This is free to students. That's time where they could have given it to a supervisee or, a client. So thank you so much for taking the time, not just Dr. Schooley, but Dr. Bayman and Dr. Townsend every week to provide these hours for us, because they do it.
And Flint Kroska's here today as well. So, yep. Yes. So we have several. Katrina Harvey, you have your hand up.
Go for it.
Good morning, Dr. Schooley. This has been excellent. I'm glad I made the time, and I'm glad you made the time for us. I appreciate it. I am wondering, I am almost to the point of graduation in March, so one more class to go.
Congratulations.
Our hours, as they're counting now with supervision and internship, I know some of my peers are calculating those hours with the BBS. I'm in California, but I have not transitioned any of those hours. Does the BBS or does Capella do anything with those hours for us at graduation? Do they automatically transfer over, or is there anything we need to do with that?
There's nothing that's automatic.
Okay.
Certainly anything that you can make happen, I would suggest you do that. We
Okay.
have an entire office at Capella, the licensure verification office, that if you have forms that have to be filled out by the university attesting to your clinical or your supervision, you would upload that form to their page in campus. They would complete that for you and send it to the state.
Okay.
And that's for any state, not just California. That's all states. Any form, I know particularly Georgia has some complicated forms that that our licensure verification office deals with all the time. So you have state forms, give it to them, and they will shepherd it through the process of getting that completed.
Thank you so much for that. Thank
you. Bet. You bet.
Just to be cognizant of time, one more time, I just want to thank Dr. Schooley and all of our advisors and other professors for their time today. I'm going to be on for the last 15 minutes. I don't know if they will because they may have other meetings or things they have to attend to, but if you have DK questions, please stick around. If you have any last minute questions, I'm sure Dr. Schooley would be able to answer them quickly, or at least give you a way that we can contact her and I can get that information for you. But thank you so much. I appreciate everyone who put their name in the chat. If you didn't, remember, if you are in Court Elms, put your name that you're in Court Elms and you will submit your hours to Dr. Bayman. Do it right now so you don't forget. If you were in Willis, if you're in the new one, put your name first and last and your faculty supervisor and let me know that you're part of Willis, because we have to submit that and get it approved by your professor. So if you haven't done that, please do it. I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I hope we see you guys for Ask Me Anything with Dr. Bayman on the 6th. If you're not following our Facebook or on our email setup list, please go online. We're always posting, and it'll give you little text and email reminders. So if you're like me and you got a million things on your plate, it'll remind you for you. So go take a look at that. But thank you again, Dr. Schooley.
My pleasure. Take care.